I stand on the bridge where I last tried to kill myself. It's been 2 years to the day, but I still remember how that night felt, what I was thinking. I was looking at the endless expanse of the Vermont Street pedestrian overpass bridge behind the Hillcrest Marketplace, and thinking it seemed like a nice place to do it. Something about the liminal space of bridges, one place becoming another, while being neither one simultaneously, lends itself to the suggestion, I think. That's why they have nets under the Golden Gate, the number one destination for the most hopeful and the most hopeless. On the Vermont Bridge, they just have higher metal walls. And not the whole way across, though, just the parts directly above the freeway, where it would inconvenience other travelers the most if someone were to, There are sections of the bridge where the fall is longer, but they don't have those high barriers. Best to save the money for where it really counts, I guess. I noticed none of those things 2 years ago. What I noticed was the long, straight corridor, lit on either end by beautiful lampposts. I noticed the dark at the other end, as if beyond that final lamppost was just nothing. And I noticed the footprints stamped into the concrete at my feet, like the ghost of some businessman before me had left a path to follow. And the loneliness of the place. No one was around. No one would have to see me. All things considered, I felt that was for the best. In 2011, I was a Macy's seller of watches and fashion jewelry. Essentially a smiling face and a pleasant, helpful backdrop against which the customer could project whatever fashion sense they already felt they had. For 11 months, I perfectly barrel-curled my hair, bedecked myself in my own wares bought on my own dime, and wore skirts, shiny things, and high-heeled shoes. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. "You need to be friendlier, more approachable," my supervisor said, "so you can get those numbers up." It would take me years to understand those code words. Inside, I wanted to rip my own skin off, and my makeup with it. Outwardly, my high heels cut deep bleeding welts into my feet after 8 hours on hard linoleum. When the rains came, the puddles in the parking lot seeped into my cuts, raising the skin in long, angry red lines. I learned how to hide the blood and the infection with dark stockings, $7.99 with the employee discount. It was also in 2011 that I first started cosplaying as a character of my own creation, Invictus Animus, automatonic captain. He was suspiciously like me in all ways, except one, and also so much more handsome and great. He was really a self-insert on the fiction page that was my life, a wish list, a dream. I'd leave my shift at Macy's and transform into the robot boy wonder, where I'd live until my work week came around again. I told myself I was fine. This was fine. After all, is anyone their real self when they're plastering on a smile for the 4th sale of the month? So I lived my life in the time that I carved out of the weekend. I told myself I could handle that. But something in my brilliant plan went wrong. I lost connection with my entire body. I felt like I was dragging a useless, perpetually smiling, mildly self-sufficient meat suit around. It started to feel like I was cosplaying myself, the watch seller who had to wear heels and skirts for some reason, and the real me was actually whatever I did dressed up as a robot. Objectively, 7 years was not all that long ago, but for trans people, it may as well have been a different century. Caitlyn Jenner, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the extension of workplace protections for trans people, these things hadn't even been conceived of yet. All I knew was that if I wanted to survive, I had to keep working, and therefore keep dressing as a female retail worker 5 days of the week. I retreated further into myself, until my only view of the world was through the remote pinholes of my eyes. At work, I finally made Employee of the Month. Highest grossing sales in the whole store. Slowly, achingly slowly, my play life and my real life switched places. Like desperate clawing over ground to get to an oasis you're sure is a mirage. It took about a year. I hated every inch of it. I hated how much I liked the way that I looked when I first put on a man's jacket. I hated how every nerve fiber vibrated when I finally cut away all my hair with a wall razor. I hated the way the world went quiet when I could finally look my reflection in the eyes when I was dressed from head to toe as an undeniably male person. I hated it because I knew that from here on out, whatever I did, I would be the freak who liked dressing up as a boy. Or was I the boy who had to dress up as a girl? There were days I couldn't remember who or what I was. I wanted to fix me, but I couldn't help but feel me was fundamentally unfixable. Pundits, comedians, politicians, my own mother, everywhere I turned, people were talking about this whole Caitlyn Jenner thing. Have you seen her? Do you know Bruce? I mean, Caitlyn, sorry, Jenner. She transitioned. Isn't that great? I mean, I really support trans people. But it's just so hard when I knew him for so long as Bruce. And he was so important to the world as an Olympic athlete and a very noticeably male one at that. It's just crazy, right? Like, why would someone even want to do that? What must his family think? That was my boss, by the way. I'm channeling a 55-year-old lesbian woman. You can imagine what my mom said. She voted for Trump. I could see from the gleeful glint in their eyes as they beheld the spectacle that was this mutant, this aberration. From all around me, I got the message loud and clear. Transgender people were insane. And if I dared to breathe a word that I thought I might be one, well, then I was insane too. I tried as hard as I could to hide the coming insanity. But I couldn't cover it with stockings. I couldn't camouflage it with makeup. I couldn't fix it with sales numbers, and I sure as shit couldn't smile it away. I tried every single fucking day to pretend as hard as I could that this was not happening to me. The suicide attempt rate for the general population is 1.6%. For transgender people, 41%. I tried to die 4 times over the course of this process. I could see that long, dark bridge between here and nowhere stretching out before me, and I knew that it'd probably be better to jump than to even try and cross it. Driving home from work, I tried to drive off the freeway into the mouth of the San Diego River. 2 weeks later, after dropping off an acquaintance from the cosplay group, I gunned my engine down a steep grade with a cliff at the bottom, and I slammed on my brakes right before I hit the guardrail. I felt nothing, and I drove home telling no one. I stopped going to the cosplay group after that, thinking that if I could keep myself from temptation, the pain would lessen. I experimented with starvation, suffocation, and eventually inertia, hoping that if I simply did nothing for long enough, I could stop being a person altogether. I couldn't decide what kind of person I wanted to be, what kind of person I was allowed to be. So I felt like the best way of answering that question was to just opt out of it altogether. I kept going to work, trying to prove I was normal, but there were entire days and weeks at a time when I never even once woke up to my body. I remember the day that even my remote pinhole vision of the world went dark. I quit my job at Macy's, which I don't remember, and got a job at a call center. I worked there for 4 months. I don't remember that either. My memory of the next few years is fuzzy, episodic, and glares with the Michael Bay lens flare of polished forgery. Everything from that time period feels overbright and colorless, like sunlight itself was painful and overbearing. I graduated with high honors from UCSD, under my old name. My degree? Acting. When I got my placeholder diploma on that bright day in June, I threw it in the trash can at the exit of Remack Field, my old name glaring up at me from amongst the deflated party balloons and upscale plastic water cups. I got a job at an office, selling theater tickets. I interviewed in a skirt and high heels. I was told that mine was the best interview that they had ever had. I settled into my fate, accepting that I was good at being a girl, and I tried my best to perform to that role. But theaters are havens of LGBT people. All around me, butch women dressed in vests and ties. My female supervisor had a wife, and so did her female supervisor. My other supervisor, a gay man, joked with me during my first week about how much he loved sparkly high heels. Some small, beaten, twisted creature in me opened a single sleepy eye and looked up. There was a quiet moment when I stood in front of my closet, trying to get dressed for the day, and I reached all the way into the back to pull out an old, dusty suit jacket. I wore it to work, and no one stopped me. A year later, I sat at my station, my insides quivering as I crafted a plan. Did I dare do this? Did I dare escape? I wrote myself a note on a little yellow slip of paper. Ask supervisors if I can have Invictus on my name tag. But a patron arrived immediately, and I shoved the note to the side, out of sight, out of mind. By the time cleanup for the end of shift happened, I had completely forgotten about the note. My supervisor found it and immediately began to read it to see if it could be trashed or if it was important. My heart stopped when I recognized what she was holding, but I kept the smile plastered on my face until my customer left my window. My supervisor's brow furrowed. I waited. And then she said, yeah, no, you can't just have any old thing on your name tag. She crumpled it up and threw it away. I stared at the yellow paper in the trash can. I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest, crumpled, and lay next to it amongst the paper refuse and empty yogurt cups. 21 minutes later, after the end of my shift, I stood at the top of the parking structure outside my work, floor 11. The wind howled up here, and I could see the bay with the Coronado Bridge stretching away to the horizon. People jumped from up here all the time, and my coworkers laughed and made crass jokes about the cleanup afterwards. I didn't see the humor, but I wondered if maybe stuff like that was funny to people who weren't as broken as I was. Maybe I just cared too much. I took a deep breath, a second one. I looked down and remembered I was afraid of heights. I started crying. I was not sad. I started laughing. I was not happy. I seemed to be having an awful lot of symptoms of things I didn't feel. I didn't feel crazy. I mean, sure, I was technically, by definition, standing on top of a parking structure ready to die, but that didn't really seem unreasonable. I could logically lay out to myself every single step that led to here. They all made sense, one after another. So why would a person who wasn't crazy, whose logic was sound, be looking at the long 110-foot drop like an old, terrifyingly tall friend? I reeled back from the edge, clutching a concrete pylon for support. I called a therapist, whose number I happened to have on hand. Yeah. January 23rd, 2016, I got my diagnosis. I was not crazy, but transgender. Even though it seems obvious, like there could be no other possible outcome, it took somebody spelling it out for me to finally stop fighting it in myself. And the treatment for this, surprisingly, wasn't talk therapy to convince me to see myself some other way, nor shock therapy to stop me from thinking about what I so desperately wanted. It was blessedly a small glass vial of 200 milligrams per milliliter testosterone. I got my first shot in the butt in my doctor's office, and I have given myself my shot every 2 weeks ever since. I overcame my fear of needles. I overcame my fear of blood. I overcame my fear of pain. I got over my fear of telling people what I wanted and telling them to go fuck themselves if they wouldn't give it to me. And I got over my fear of caring too much. I care exactly as much as I need to. I never did get over my fear of heights, though. So, now, as I stand on the Vermont Street pedestrian overpass bridge, a whole 2 years later, I am afraid. I look down at the tops of palm trees still dizzyingly 40 feet below me, and I shudder. For the first time in a long time, I am more afraid of falling than I am of living.
That's VAMP first-timer Invictus Animus.